Hello, this is Kevin with Bangert, and in this session we're going to continue our introduction to eTakeoff Dimensions. This is video 5 of 5, and in this one we're going to take a look at, now that we've learned how to quantify things in the image takeoff side, we're going to look at how to actually move those or take those quantities and put them into our estimate to finish pricing and productivities and finishing off like an estimate or so forth. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and bring the eTakeoff back up and the project we were working with in the prior series. And I'm also going to go ahead and let's just say we're going to do some basic takeoff like we did in the previous one. So I'm just going to go ahead and use AI to help me here with a snap. And I just want to take off the pool and the spall for this first example. So I'm just going to say, cool, it's not going to be a standard trace, and that would be fine. And I'm just going to go ahead there and say that I've got it, and let's go back and do a quick area then on the spall, and maybe we'll change up colors a little bit, and don't need it to be a standard either, and let's go ahead and pick it off. So I've got 551 square foot for the pool and 56 square foot for the spall at the moment. So let's say I went through and I've taken off all the objects out of one. And then at some point, we need to build an estimate so we can price it and things of that nature. So this method I'm showing first is nothing set up ahead of time. If you notice, I made that trace up as we went. I'm going to be just making some items up as we go, use nothing of a database and so forth. Just basically quick way of getting items into an estimate and get some quantities linked up. So I'm just going to do a one-time item for the moment. I'm just going to go ahead and pick something to do with Division 13 here. And I'm just going to give it a real basic description. I want that to be square feet. And let's say, in my case, I'm just going to say that we're going to sub it. So something like that. And let's go ahead and do another one then. So I'm just going to hit one-time item again. And let's say there's a special edging around that pool that is priced different. Maybe that's done per linear foot. And then I'm just going to take both those items, highlight them, copy and paste, and change them up a little bit. So that way I've got me a couple items for the pool and a couple items for the spall. So now that I've got an item in my estimate, I could either do this from the estimate, or I could do it from within like item takeoff if I've got a database build and things of that nature and drop it right in that item as it's going to the spreadsheet and so forth. In this case, I can right click in that cell. I can tell it I want to get a quantity from dimension. It'll bring my eTakeoff back to the front ground. I pick on the trace that I want, and I just tell it to return that quantity. And that easy, I've got that linked to this estimate to this cell. It notates that with a little triangle in the corner there. So I'm going to do the same thing with the spall then. So I'm going to say get a dimension, click on my spall, tell it to return the quantity, and that easy, I've got those. Now, in addition to square footage, counts, perimeters, other quantities are going along for the ride when I make area measurements and so forth. So in this case here, I want this edging linear footage. So this one I'm going to do a little different. So instead of saying get dimension, because get dimension gets the main quantity, this will say get dimension and let me select what variable I want to retrieve. So I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going back to that pool. I'm going to tell it I want to return a quantity. It's going to pull up a list showing me that same area, but in this case, I want the perimeter. And I'm going to do the same thing with my other edging. And now very easily, I've got these quantities actually in my spreadsheet. Now, some people would question, well, these aren't very large quantities, so the amount of time it took me to right-click, pick a trace, tell it to send it back, where's the benefit in that? So what I'm going to look at now is, let's say that you're in a different project, or let's say right now when I look at a pool, you'll see the focus is on the pool, or the focus is on the spall, or I don't have a focus on either one at the moment. If I went to a completely different page, I could be in a different project or anything of that nature. If I go back to estimating at any point in time, whether it's a few seconds like now, or whether it's a month from now, if somebody wanted to know, wait a second, we didn't see a spall in that print, where'd you find a spall? You can actually any of these cells that have the little green notation there, I can right click on it, tell it to drill down to my eTakeoff dimension, and it will open that project back up, take me to that plan page, and focus the cursor around wherever that object came from. So very, very powerful when someone goes back and says, well, where'd you find any vinyl in this project? Or where'd you find C1 in this project? Or whatever the case might be, ties my estimate in with that print. So it makes it very easy to go back and tell where these different objects were found. With that same thing, what if I made changes? So if I kind of take a look at this SPA a little bit, and let's say I'm going to turn off Snap AI so don't start trying to help attach to other lines. I'm just going to say that I want to move a few points here. So let's say that I had 56 square foot of this SPA, and I'm just going to kind of move it around here a little bit to change my quantities up a little bit. So let's say they're proposing this SPA is going to be a little bit different shape for some reason. So I'm going to say that's enough there. So I went from my 55 or whatever that 50 some square foot was to 76 square foot. So anytime something changes in my image, if I go back to my estimate, there's a button here that says update from dimension. When I click on it, it will give me a list of what changed. So I had 56, I changed it to 76. The perimeter also changed along the line. So this gives me a kind of a recourse of what things have I went back and did more takeoff on, found more product, less product, changed something, and it could actually update those quantities in the spreadsheet. So if you notice, I've already got 76 square foot here in my spreadsheet. I could save these if I wanted a log of what changes were made along the way. In my case, I'm just going to say close, and very easy to make modifications, get my estimate up to date, and be able to go back into a project later and figure out where that content is from. So those are just basically using a quick function of just get dimension, no setup to be had, very easy to do. The next section I want to take a look at here is if I go back to my eTakeoff, in one of the series we talked about standard traces here, and that we could actually create standard traces and things of that nature. So in this section, what I want to take a look at is there's a utility called eTakeoff Trace Utility. And what that does is it allows you to pick what items and what assemblies you want to see in eTakeoff. So if you think about, oh, well, we've got windows and doors and different things like that, that those are items in my estimating database. I'd like to have those as items here in eTakeoff. So what that does for me, as fast as I pick that trace here in eTakeoff, it can know what to transfer that to in an estimate without having to do the cross relationship like I kind of did on these two items that I brought over earlier. With that being said, this is also where it could be an assembly. So if you think about assembly, could ask all sorts of questions about length of the wall, height of the wall, how many layers of drywall are on each side of the wall, and things of that nature. So all those same variables that you've got in estimating come over here to eTakeoff, that I can see those from this perspective. There's also some things in your estimating database that don't make sense to bring over. That's why they use a utility, so you can kind of cherry pick what items you'd actually want to quantify. So when you think about like a superintendent or a tool trailer or something of that nature, some items you may not just go through and I don't have a need of, I can't really calculate off an image the superintendent months or something of that nature. So there's some objects that just, or some items that just don't make sense to be necessarily clutter up your list and eTakeoff. So let's get started. Let's take a look at a couple of those items. So in my estimate, I'm also going to get more detailed in, now that I'm going to be taking over quite a few items over, I want to also kind of do a better job of kind of grouping them. So I'm going to go up to my control panel and I'm going to turn on my WBS for work breakdown structures. So what this is going to allow me to do is, this is going to allow me to go through and, matter of fact, maybe I'll leave that in there so I could keep this turned off. So I can group these things later in my spreadsheet. So the first thing I want to take off is some exterior walls. So instead of me going around, clicking around the perimeter of this thing and so forth, I'm going to go ahead and use a toggle AI that we looked at in a prior session. I'm going to say that I want to go over here to These were the different items that I brought over in assembly. So this is particularly assembly for my estimating. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that assembly. And if you notice, I can start highlighting walls and doing takeoff and things of that nature. In my case, I'm going to come over here and tell it that what I'm focusing on is more of the footprint of the project because I want to do the exterior wall of it. So now if you notice, as soon as I hover over one portion of it, it knows that all those objects are part of the exterior wall. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick it. So as I take a look at it here, it automatically knows that I've got 750 lineal foot here. I didn't have to sit there and click around every little edge and so forth. I'm also going to give it a task item. So when I group this in my estimating, I'm just going to kind of call them off in the order I'm doing them. So I'm going to say I first started with some walls exterior. This is where I could go down, and these are the variables for my estimating. What's the height of that wall? What's the stud width? What's the gauge? If I hover over them, they'll also tell me, like in the estimating, when you're doing assembly, a little help box pops up and so forth. So as you hover over these different variables, you can actually see the same pop-up come up to help me with whatever information might be in there. And that's where I can go down through and answer all the different questions associated with the wall. Now, in real life, this would also go a little bit slower, probably because maybe some of these walls are 10 foot and some of these are 14 foot or different heights or something like that, that you'd probably break off each one into a separate, kind of a separate run. So that way you can do the dimensions. So when I get to interior walls, I'll kind of do them in a couple different passes. But for my exterior walls, I'm going to say we're good. I went through and kind of got my label so I can group these items, and I've went through all my different assembly questions. So I'm going to say everything's good with that wall at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and think about some interior walls in. Now for interior walls, I'm going to do kind of the same thing. So I'm going to come over here though, and I'm going to say walls. And instead of me there again trying to highlight all the different walls, I'm going to say the first walls that I want to do is going to be just, let's say I want to do the corridor, and I'm going to say interior or, nope, let's just do the corridor by itself. So let's say that there's all my corridor wall lengths. There again, I could go through and answer all my questions. So if I wanted 3 5/8 stud instead of a 6-inch stud and things like that, I could define what drywall on both sides of the wall, whatever it may be. I'm also going to come back and tell it that this is going to be part of my interior walls, and this was part of the corridor. And we're good there. I'm going to pick that same trace again. And this time I'm going to pick up the, let's pick up the walls again. This time I want the demising walls, interior walls, and there again, I'm going to say all my dimensions are fine here, but most likely they probably be a little different in real life. And I'm going to go ahead and change just a little bit different so I could see the separation between those. And there I've got as much walls I'm going to take off at the moment. So as I go through here, you also start to see that a lot of my takeoff is starting to get, if I want to take off the flooring or things like that, maybe the walls are kind of overwhelming me at this point. So I'm going to go over here to view. We talked about adding control panel, so I'm going to add another control panel here. And what the control panel is going to allow me to do is turn on and off different things. So in this case here, I could come back and say that I want to turn off some of these different views. So now when I start doing takeoff of something else, maybe I don't have to look at as much. Matter of fact, I am going to keep on my this one and this one, so that way when I get to them, they'll show up, and I'll just kind of get that out of the way for a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to do some tile. I'm going to go off to maybe for the tile, maybe that was in the bathroom. So I automatically picked up my bathrooms. Let's say the kitchen's going to be the same product, so I'm going to pick up the kitchens. And there again, this is where I could go down through and answer the questions. And the only thing I'm going to do here different is I'm going to say I only need one side of base for those walls. And then I'm going to come up here and let's change this to something about flooring then. And let's go ahead and do carpet. Carpet I'll do a little different. So instead of me going over here and picking different areas for the carpet, I might come in here and just pick rooms. So maybe that meeting room has carpet in it. Maybe this boardroom has a carpet in it. Maybe the general manager's office does, and this office. So there again, not having to sit there and pick areas and jog around the corners and things of that nature very quickly. I just basically click on whatever rooms are going to be appropriate for the flooring material I'm doing. I'm going to just leave it at 03 for flooring since these are just individual items. I'm going to come down here and tell it there again, I only need one side of the wall for my floor base and so forth. And I'm going to say that's good for that side. So now I want to take a look at maybe some of my fixtures and item type of things. So I'm going to go back up and look at my trace here, and I'm going to turn on some bathroom accessories. So as I take them off, I can see them. So I'm going to just start with the tub. So as I go through here, where in this set of prints are they? Let's say right there. So as I hold down my control key, you notice that all of them light up for wherever the tubs are. And maybe I'll come back up then and say, whoops, where'd my WBS value for that go? And let's change that up a little bit. So maybe I'll just say 04. Got some fixtures. And let's go ahead and catch the, maybe some sinks. So we'll say that these count for the sinks. And we'll leave those at the same. Bathroom fixtures and so forth. And let's pick up some toilets. And let's say that those are the toilets ones. And we'll leave it at the same value. So that's enough takeoff for now. So I've done a little bit of item takeoff, assembly takeoff, things of that nature to put it all together. So there's a program called Bridge that is actually kind of the middleman that'll help me find the different things that are on this project to facilitate getting those over to my estimate. So I'm going to go ahead and start Bridge up. I'm also going to go back to my estimating and get out of that estimate. So as soon as I try to start Bridge up, it says there's no project associated with this project that I'm working with and need takeoff. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to create a new one. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, oops, got to click up there to get there. Where's it going? So in this case, estimating. I could hit add new if I wanted to create a new estimate. I want to put in that estimate we already started. So I'm going to go to browse and I'm going to go down and find that estimate that I got started on the other side. So I think it was under here. And it already knows what project I'm in. So I'm going to say, okay. So manual stuff would let me pick manual items and drop manual drop traces associated with it. In this case, I'm going to look at automatic because a lot of the items that I had set up or a lot of the traces I had set up automatically know what to do in estimating. So if you notice here, I've got all sorts of my exterior walls, my interior walls and things of that nature. I've got my different flooring. I've got my different tubs, sinks, toilets, things of that nature. So those are all the objects that I took off that actually think they know what they associate with in estimating already. So in this case here, all I had to do is hit the little generate thing here that'll basically go off and build my estimate with it. This message is going to ask me whether I need to truncate any WBS code. So like where I was typing in 01 walls exterior, I could have a WBS code that was only set up for like 10 characters and maybe I typed in more than 10 characters. So should it truncate it or not truncate it? In this case, I don't think I should have any thing that needs to be reduced. And it's going to go ahead and generate my 182 things that we took off there. So if I go from here over to my estimate then, here's the estimate and all the different detail of whatever product. So a lot of my sheetrock or labor or whatever the things are that already have my quantities, and I could just start updating productivities, number of hours, things of that nature. If you think about it, this is actually all broke off into CSI divisions, so kind of the way the database is organized. So if I say collapse, maybe that's basically what I've got is I've got some sheathing probably for that exterior wall and some insulation probably for the exterior wall, and some of the different products for my walls and my swimming pools that we did earlier, and all my plumbing fixtures and so forth are all kind of organized by the CSI divisions. In my case, I had also did something called task item. So if I take a look at it, task item unassigned was all that takeoff I started with. So when I did that pool and so forth, I didn't really tell it any task items. I just one-time item, put them in the estimate, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and just minimize those for a moment and focus on, hey, we had an exterior wall. We use this assembly. These were all the different products that were part of that assembly. All these items have the link back to where they came from in the drawing. I could also, since this is an assembly, I could go to review assembly and see what time I generated this and how I answered all the questions. So there again, if I've got to modify them, I can either modify them here or modify them in takeoff to update some of these quantities and so forth. There's my walls. So I had some wall takeoff there, and I'm just going to go ahead and double click on those to close that up quicker. And there's my interior demising wall and so forth. So I'm going to roll it up. Here's all my different flooring products of the tile versus the carpet and so forth. And then here's all the different things that were not done with an assembly. These were just item takeoff for just different items that we quantified for all the toilet fixtures and so forth. So as somebody's going back through there again, I could be looking at this project. I'm going to go back into maybe control panel, and I'm going to turn my different takeoff back on. I'm going to back off maybe just a little bit, maybe even be on a different page. So same thing that we saw earlier is similar here. So as you're looking at this and are trying to decide where do we come up with this resilient tile flooring and things like that, it's got the little notation there again. So I could right hand click on it. I could drill down the bridge. It will open that project up, open the page up, and actually show me, in this case here, this is my 50, and this is how, if there's multiple questions associated with an assembly, it would show me those. If I kind of minimize my bridge and get that out of the way and so forth, you'll see this particular room here is where that 50 square foot came from. So very easy to go back from an estimate and tell where this content was. Same thing also for modifying it. So if somebody went back and maybe I changed the size of this and so forth. So let's go ahead and take a look at that a little bit. So let's say for some reason I found out that this room is actually a different size. So in my case, I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off at the moment and just say that I want to modify a few points. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of stretch this out a little bit larger. So let's say that maybe this room is now changed to that size. If I modify anything, so let's also say that, let me go back to view. And let's go ahead and turn off for a moment the tile and carpet. So let's say for some reason, maybe you got a different tub count or anything like that. You could be deleting quantities off of things and so forth. Also, I could be adding more quantities. So whatever it may be that I could change on the image, I could go back and actually focus on those and change them around and so forth also. And it looks like I'm still moving that line. So let me finish that one up first. So I might go back there and say that I want to just delete this one point. So that way, basically my number of tubs are different for some reason now. So I've made a couple changes. I changed the size of that one room and I got rid of a tub for some reason. If I go back and look at my bridge, this window here was automatic. This shows me anything new. So if I hit refresh here, I didn't really do anything new in this case, but if I had, it would show up where I could push it to my estimate if I need to. Review will let me go back and see what things are in the estimate. So here's all the different items that are in that estimate and so forth. As I look at that list of items, up here, I can also change it. So if it was just something that has not been changed, I don't care about it at the moment. I'm going to turn that off. So I can just focus on the changes that I've made to that. So These are all the things that I've went back and modified after I already pushed it over to an estimate. So if I start with that first one and look at it, this is that room that I made bigger. If I take a look, 50 is what I got on my estimate, 69 is what I currently got in my image takeoff. If for some reason, I don't want that to affect the estimate, I could just close it up and not do anything. If I did want that 69 to be in my estimate, all I have to do is hit this little thing that's flashing at me. That'll basically move it over here. I can hit the green box or the green check mark for OK, and that'll basically update my estimate with that new quantity. So I've got my new quantity over here then. As I go back through and look at like the tub, kind of the same thing. I could come back in here and take a look at it. It would basically kind of take me back to where it was originally from a little bit. It would show me that we went from a quantity of 7 down to 6. There again, if that's right, I did want to remove that tub. I could bring it down, push that to my estimate. Now in my estimate, when I take a look at it, I should have six tubs instead of the 7. Still all linked, something I could go back and review, things of that nature. So that's the power when you have the two linked together, that you can actually do takeoff and very easily pass those quantities over to your estimate to then give you your spreadsheet to price and update and things of that nature. That concludes the series on the eTakeoff intro. Thanks for joining us. Please comment if you got any questions or anything like that we might be able to help with. And thanks for watching.